The contact Alia stood at the edge of the observation deck, staring out at the human station floating silently above the glowing blue planet below. It was her first time stepping foot on anything built by humans. Their design was nothing like Varellan craft. Where her people used smooth living metals and breathing walls, this station felt cold, rigid, mechanical. Strange pipes ran along the ceilings, and the light flickered sometimes, as if the place was never quite at peace. Still, she couldn't deny there was something alive about it. In its own way, she folded her arms behind her back and kept her expression neutral. That was how she was trained. Varellans were taught to hold their emotions beneath the surface, to speak with control, to never show weakness. Feelings were to be observed, not acted upon. She had passed all the trials, climbed through the diplomatic ranks faster than most, and had been trusted to lead this mission to the humans. They were still considered unpredictable and possibly dangerous. Her task was to study them, report their behavior, and advise the council on whether they were a threat or a future ally. She was prepared for many things on this trip. She was not prepared for what happened in the repair bay. It was a small error. A minor energy pulse had overloaded one of the corridor panels near the observation deck. Alia offered to inspect the damage herself, a sign of respect toward her human hosts. The chief engineer, a man named Mark, had been sent to assist her. He was tall for a human, with short dark hair and a steady voice that carried a quiet kindness. His uniform was stained with old work, his hands marked with tiny scars from machines. He greeted her with a nod and a simple, "Didn't expect someone like you to come down here, but welcome." Alia said nothing at first. She followed him through the narrow maintenance tunnels until they reached the broken panel. He crouched, lifted it open, and started pulling wires with a calm confidence that reminded her of an old Varellan craftsman. Something about the way he moved made her pause. Then it happened. He passed her a tool. Their fingers touched. Just for a second, it was like being struck by a silent thunder. Alia's vision blurred. Her knees weakened. Heat rushed through her veins, and her breath caught in her throat. In that instant, her mind was flooded with something she couldn't name. Images, feelings, fragments of memory that weren't hers. A deep warmth that settled right at the center of her chest, pulsing with life. Her heart, normally so steady, began to race. Her skin glowed faintly, just at her wrist where the Varellan soul mark slept. But it wasn't sleeping anymore. Mark stepped back quickly, concern flickering across his face. "Are you all right?" he asked, but she couldn't answer. She was staring at her wrist in disbelief. A faint symbol had appeared there, one she knew from the old myths. A spiral of light, edged with lines that reached out like roots. The soul mark. A biological signal buried deep in every Varellan's genetics, but believed to be long dormant. The last recorded case had been centuries ago. Most scholars believed it was a flaw from a more primitive time. Alia had never known anyone who experienced it, until now. She hid her hand behind her back and forced herself to breathe. Her training kicked in, and her face returned to stillness, but inside she was chaos. The signal only triggered when a Varellan met the one they were genetically bonded to. The connection was deeper than logic, deeper than tradition. It wasn't just emotional. It was cellular, spiritual, forbidden by some, sacred to others. She stared at Mark. He was looking at her with confusion, maybe even worry. He had no idea what had just happened. He didn't feel what she felt, or did he? Could humans even sense it? She took the tool, nodded once, and turned away. "I am fine," she said, her voice sharper than she meant. They walked back in silence. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her mind was racing with everything this meant. If word reached her superiors, she would be pulled from the mission, maybe even sent back to face questioning, or worse. Some on the council saw the soul mark as a threat to control. The old stories said it led Varellans to think with their hearts, instead of their minds, to bond with outsiders, to reject the structure of their kind. That kind of freedom was dangerous. She couldn't let anyone know. Not yet, but the symbol still glowed faintly under her skin. And every time she glanced at Mark, she felt something pulling her toward him, not just attraction. Something deeper. A gravity. A recognition. Back at her quarters, she sat alone in silence, hand over her wrist, breathing slowly. She should have reported it. She didn't. Instead, she stared at the faint glow and whispered a single word under her breath. A word she hadn't said since childhood, when the soul mark was still spoken of as legend. Bonded out there, in another room on the station. Mark was sitting at a workbench, staring at his hand. He had seen her flinch, felt the warmth. And in the quiet moment after she left, he swore he heard something strange in the back of his mind. A voice not his own. A whisper he couldn't remember. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew something had changed. The panic and the Paulilia didn't sleep that night. She sat still in her room while the artificial lights dimmed around her. The walls of the human station were colder than she liked. She was used to the gentle hum of Virellan vessels that pulsed with organic warmth and rhythm, like a living creature breathing in sleep. But now everything around her felt distant and unfamiliar. And yet the most unfamiliar thing was inside her chest. The bond was real. She had felt it in her bones. It wasn't imagined. Her soul mark was glowing even now, soft but steady. She looked down at her wrist again. The symbol was no longer fading. It had settled in like it belonged there, like it had only been waiting for the right moment to awaken. Her breath was unsteady, something rare for her. She had passed every test of discipline. In her youth, her mind was supposed to be sharper than doubt, but now it was full of questions she couldn't silence. Who was this human named Mark? Why had the bond chosen him? Was he even aware of what had happened? Could his body even understand what a Virellan soul mark was? She paced the room slowly, hands behind her back. The room was still, but her thoughts moved like a storm. The Virellan High Council had warned her about emotional entanglements, especially with humans. They called humans bold, dangerous, chaotic. She had seen records of human wars, the fierce way they fought, the reckless way they loved. Her people called it imbalance. But she had also seen moments in the files where humans showed something else: kindness, bravery, loyalty, even sacrifice. It was those qualities that had caught the attention of the younger Virellan scholars. That was why this mission had been approved in the first place, and now this she knew that even touching a human too closely could draw suspicion. But this was beyond anything they expected. The soul mark was not something anyone could fake. It was written deep in her DNA, in her bloodline. It had chosen. A soft tone echoed through her room, signaling a message. She walked to the console and tapped the screen. It was a note from command, a scheduled meeting with her team in 4 hours to deliver her first impression report on human behavior. She stared at the message. How could she report on humans when she had just bonded with one? She turned off the screen. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. Same sharp eyes, same calm face. But something inside was breaking away from that calm. She pressed her fingers to her chest. The warmth was still there elsewhere on the station. Mark was in his quarters, tossing a small metal part between his fingers. He didn't understand what had happened earlier. When he touched her hand, it had felt like something jumped inside his chest. Not painful, but deep. Almost like a breath he hadn't taken in years had suddenly rushed in all at once. He had seen her reaction. It wasn't small. She had tried to hide it, but he wasn't blind. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had worked with many alien species over the last few years, but never the Virellans. They were quiet, powerful, and extremely disciplined. They never showed emotion. They rarely touched anyone. That moment between them wasn't just strange. It felt important. And then there was the dream. He didn't believe in visions. But after she left, when he finally drifted off, something came to him. He saw a field of light, stars hanging close to the ground like fruit from a tree. And standing in the middle was her. She didn't speak, but he felt her calling him. Not with words, but with feeling. Her hand reached for his, and when their fingers touched, the stars pulsed. He woke up sweating. He had never had a dream like that before now. He was walking the corridors of the station, trying to clear his head, but everything reminded him of her. The way she had looked at him. Not just curiosity, there had been fear and something else. Like recognition. He passed by a few human officers but didn't stop to talk. He found himself outside the research wing, staring at a large metal door with a Varellan symbol marked on it. He didn't know what it meant, but it drew him in. Just as he was reaching for it, someone called out his name. He turned and saw Elia standing behind him. Her eyes met his, calm but sharp. She walked toward him with quiet steps. He tried to smile but stopped himself. Something about her presence made jokes feel small. She stood in front of him now, hands behind her back like always. You felt it. She said it wasn't a question. He didn't answer at first. Then he nodded slowly. I don't know what it was, but yeah, something happened. She studied his face for a moment. Then she spoke. Among my people, we have something called a soul mark. It is a signal, a connection that activates only once in a lifetime. It chooses someone, that someone becomes part of you. Not just emotionally, not just spiritually, but in a way that cannot be reversed. He blinked. So you're saying I'm your soulmate? She flinched slightly at the word, then gave a short nod. The term is human, but the meaning is similar. My people believe this bond is sacred. Others believe it is dangerous. I was not meant to experience it. Not here. Not with the human. Mark looked away for a second. The hallway was silent, except for the soft hum of the light. So, what happens now? That was the question she had been asking herself for hours. What happens now? I don't know, she said. They stood in silence for a long moment, both watching each other. Closely, not with fear, but with something that was still forming, still shaping. A connection neither of them had asked for, but one that now existed, no matter what they believed, far above them. In the command deck, Elia's superior watched a silent video clip, a recording from earlier that day. It showed the moment their hands touched, and the faint glow that rose from her wrist. He narrowed his eyes and tapped his console. Everything was changing. Revelation and pursuit. The station was quieter than usual. Something hung in the air that no one could name. The Varellan officers moved through the halls with slower steps. Their eyes seemed sharper, their words shorter. Even the humans had begun to feel it, though no one said anything out loud. It was the silence before a storm. Elia walked quickly through the lower deck corridors, her robe brushing the walls as she moved. Her body felt like it was carrying too much heat. Not from the station, but from within. The soul mark had started pulsing again, not painful but stronger than before. She had tried meditating to control it. She had tried cold water. She had tried silence. Nothing worked. The bond was awake now and refused to sleep again. She turned into a sealed section of the archive level, away from the crew. It was a forgotten wing of the station, mostly used for storage and old data cores. She had discovered it during her first week on the station, but never thought she would return. Now she was searching for something hidden in old Varellan files. Something that had been whispered in stories but never written in official records. Her fingers moved quickly across the data console. Ancient security locks blocked most of the deeper knowledge, but she still had clearance high enough to bypass some of the gates. A soft hum responded as a screen opened. It displayed a glowing spiral, the same shape that had appeared on her wrist. Her heart jumped. She leaned closer. The files revealed something older than her people's current council. It spoke of a time when Varellans had not been as cold as they were now, a time when they had allowed emotion to guide them. Back then, the soul mark was common. It led to peace between worlds, to unity with other species. But then something happened. A war, a betrayal. The council erased the truth, replaced it with order and control. From that time onward, the soul mark was branded as unstable and dangerous. She sat back, breathing slow and deep. The stories she had grown up with were wrong. Her people had once trusted this bond. They had once seen it as a gift, not a threat. And now here she was, bonded with a human, the very species they feared. Most she heard a sound behind her. Turning fast, she saw Mark entering the room. His face looked tense. "You weren't in your quarters," he said. "I followed your signal here. Are you all right?" She didn't speak right away. She looked at him, and once again she felt the strange pull, stronger than before. She stepped aside and let him see the screen. He stared at the symbol, then at her. His voice was quiet. "This thing between us, it's not random, is it?" "No," she said. "It is older than either of us. And someone is trying to keep it buried." They heard movement again. This time it wasn't Mark. From the shadows, two Varellan officers stepped forward. Their faces were hard, and their hands rested near the weapons at their sides. One of them spoke with a voice like, "Ice, you were ordered to report any genetic changes. Instead, you hid them. And now you access forbidden data with a human. You are to come with you." Isaiah stepped in front of Mark without thinking. Her voice was steady, but her hands were tense. "I am still in command here." "You will not touch him. You are no longer in command," the officer said. "The council has stripped your rights the moment the soul mark was confirmed. You are compromised. You have broken the boundary." Mark raised his hand slightly. He was trying to stay calm, but the tension was building fast. The Varellans looked ready to act. Elia took a slow step back, her mind moving quickly behind her. The data core was still active. She reached for the console and pressed a sequence she remembered from her childhood training. Emergency protocol. Hidden, forgotten, but still inside her memory. The room lit up for a second, and then the backup generator began to hum. A pulse of energy spread from the console and knocked the two officers back. "Not enough to hurt them, but enough to break their stance." "Move," she said to Mark. Now they ran through the dark hallways, through metal tunnels and service ladders, past sleeping drones and old storage rooms. Elia guided him through parts of the station most people never used. She had memorized the paths during her early scouting. Now it was saving them both. They stopped in a narrow space behind the water filtration tanks. Mark leaned against the wall, catching his breath. "What are we going to do now?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "But if they take us, they will erase everything. They will silence the bond. And the truth we just found will be locked away again." He looked at her closely. "You're willing to risk everything for this?" She nodded. "Once. I have seen enough to know that this bond is not a weakness. It is a key. A door my people sealed long ago. Then let's unlock it," he said. She stared at him, surprised by how certain he sounded. "No fear, no doubt. Only resolve. There is one place," she said. "An old artifact. It's locked in a hidden vault beneath the science deck. Varellans found it during the first contact with your kind. It reacted to human touch, but they kept it secret. They were afraid of what it might awaken." "You think it's connected to the soul mark?" "I think it's more than that. I think it may be the source." They moved again, quietly now. Every step mattered. Every sound could bring attention. They reached the lower levels, past the main reactors, and into a sealed chamber guarded by old symbols. Elia placed her hand on the panel. It didn't open. She stepped back and looked at Mark. "Try." He hesitated for just a moment, then placed his hand on the scanner. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a stone structure, smooth and glowing. Faintly, as if it were breathing. Symbols ran across its surface, alive with light. As they stepped closer, both of their soul marks began to glow brighter. A hum filled the chamber, and the artifact began to shift. Something ancient had been waiting, and now it had awakened sacrifice and truth. The air inside the chamber felt thick, like it was holding something ancient and powerful. Elia stepped forward slowly, eyes fixed on the glowing structure in the center. Her heartbeat was loud in her chest. Mark stood close beside her, his eyes filled with the same confusion and wonder that lived inside her. The walls of the vault were covered in shapes and markings Elia had never seen before, not even in the oldest Virellan records. The language was not fully Virellan and not fully human. It was something in between, a mix of both, like it had been written by a hand that had touched two worlds at once. The symbols shifted slightly as the light pulsed through the room. The artifact was not just reacting to them, it was calling them. Remembering them, Mark moved closer and reached out his hand. As his fingers touched the surface of the stone, the entire chamber lit up with a warm silver glow. The markings spread across the floor and climbed the walls. A hum filled the room, deep and low like the sound of an ocean far away. Elia felt the pull again inside her chest. The soul mark flared with heat, not painful but overwhelming. It pushed her forward until her hand rested beside Mark's on the artifact. The moment both of them made contact, the air shimmered and the chamber shook. Then everything changed. Light filled her mind, not from the room, but from within. Memories that weren't hers flowed into her thoughts. Images of old Virellan standing beside humans on a world long lost. She saw fire and rain. She saw hands reaching across species. She saw the first soul mark forming in the dark between stars. She felt their joy and sorrow, their hope, their fall. The bond had once united their kinds, but fear had broken it. The leaders of her people had chosen silence over unity, power over truth. They sealed away the history and cast out the soul mark as if it were a sickness. But it was not a sickness. It was a gift. The light dimmed and her knees gave out. She dropped to the ground, breathing heavy. Mark caught her before she fell fully. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He had seen it too. You saw it, didn't you? He asked. Yes. She whispered. They tried to erase everything. They buried the truth. Before they could speak more, the door behind them burst open. Elia's superior entered with 4 other Virellan guards. Their faces were sharp and cold, weapons drawn. One stepped forward and shouted a command. Stand down now. Step away from the artifact. Mark raised his hand slowly. Elia stood up and stepped between him and the guards. Her voice was steady, but her soul mark burned like fire. You knew about this, she said quietly. You knew what this place was and what it holds. You knew the truth. Her superior's eyes narrowed. The truth is poison. It leads to chaos. We buried it for a reason. The bond weakens us. It clouds the mind. It opens the heart, Elia replied. And maybe that is what you truly fear. She felt the soul mark pulsing again. The artifact behind her glowed brighter. It sensed danger. It sensed choice. Her superior raised his hand. One of the guards stepped forward, aiming his weapon at Mark. Surrender the human. We will erase the bond. You may still return with honor. Elia took a step back. Her voice shook not with fear, but with power. No, the air shifted. The artifact responded. A wave of energy pushed through the room, knocking the guards back. Only Elia and Mark remained standing. The glow around them turned into a shell of light, protecting them. Mark looked at her, his voice low. They'll keep coming. I know you could give me up and go back. I won't. Artifact pulsed again, as if confirming her choice. Symbols rose into the air, glowing like stars. A voice spoke, not in words but in meaning. The bond had been chosen. The path could not be broken now. Not without great cost. Her superior rose from the floor, rage on his face. You would betray your own kind for this. You many would choose the truth, she said. I would choose the bond. Then you are no longer Virellan, maybe not the kind you want me to be. Guards tried to move forward again, but the artifact flared and pushed them back once more. Elia turned to Mark. This bond is real, but it comes with a price. We may not have a place among either of our people. Not yet. He looked at her and smiled a little. Then we make our own place. A sudden rumble shook the station. The energy from the chamber had triggered alarms across the ship. Red lights flashed. Voices called through comms. The guards pulled back for now, retreating from the growing light. Alia and Mark stood alone in the center of the chamber, soul marks glowing together as one. The artifact between them continued to pulse gently as if it were alive and watching. They did not know what tomorrow would bring. They only knew the bond had awakened something old and powerful. Not just between them, but in the hearts of both species. She reached out and took his hand. For the first time she didn't pull away. He squeezed it gently, and in that moment, neither of them was afraid. The station drifted quietly above the planet as the light from the artifact chamber began to fade. It was not gone. It had simply settled. The energy that once filled every wall had returned to silence. But something had changed. It lived now in the hearts of those who had seen the truth. Alia and Mark stepped out of the chamber slowly. The walls no longer shook. The alarms had stopped. The corridors were quiet. Yet the air felt heavier than before. Word had already spread. Eyes followed them from shadows. Some human crew watched with confusion, others with fear. The Varellan officers who once walked with pride now stood still, unsure of how to move. The two walked side by side, not speaking yet fully aware of each other's presence. The soul mark had faded from bright glow to a steady warmth, but its presence remained. It beat in rhythm with their steps with every breath they took. It was no longer a strange power. It had become a part of them. They reached the main council chamber of the station. A group of humans stood at the far side, speaking in low voices. On the other side stood the Varellan command team, led by Elia's superior. He no longer looked angry. He looked tired. "You returned," he said quietly. "I did," Elia replied. "You should have. Rooney did not come to run. I came to speak." The humans turned their attention to her. Some recognized Mark and nodded to him with respect. Others still looked unsure, but curious. Elia stepped forward and faced both sides. Her voice was calm, not cold, not emotional, just steady and true. "We were taught to believe that the soul mark was a danger, a mistake, a lost myth. We were told it was a weakness that led to broken logic, but I have touched its truth. I have seen what our history tried to hide, and I now understand that it is not weakness. It is memory. It is unity." Her superior stepped forward. "You threaten balance by standing there. The council will not accept this. Then the council may need to change," she said. Human commander stepped forward now. He looked at Mark, then at Elia. "What exactly happened down there?" he asked. Mark answered quietly. "We saw a vision, a shared memory, of a time when Varellans and humans stood together. Not as strangers, but as something more." The room fell silent. Elia looked around at both sides. "I am not asking for permission to exist. I am not asking for approval. I am saying this bond is real, and it will not be broken because of fear." One of the younger Varellan officers stepped forward. His voice was soft. "I saw the mark. I believe what she says. We have been following rules made in fear, not truth." Others began to whisper. Some nodded. Some remained silent. Her superior looked around and saw the cracks forming in his command. He stepped back without a word and did not speak again. The human commander sighed, then stepped toward Elia slowly. "If what you say is true, this changes everything. It means our histories are incomplete. It means we are not alone in what we feel. Maybe we never were." He looked at the others. "Maybe it is time we rewrite what we thought we knew." In the following days, everything began to shift. Elia and Mark were placed under observation at first, but no punishment came. Instead, researchers from both sides asked questions. They studied the artifact together. They interviewed Elia and Mark with care, not as criminals, but as something new. Reports were sent to Varellan High Command. The council did not respond at first, but weeks later a message arrived. A formal statement that the soul mark was to be reevaluated. that a new team would begin uncovering the hidden history. It was not an apology, but it was a beginning. Jelia remained on the station as an advisor, no longer just a diplomat. Now something more. Mark returned to his engineering work, but his role had changed. He was no longer just a name on a maintenance list. He was the first human in recorded history to form a true bond with a Varellan. People began to visit him. Some brought questions. Others brought stories of strange dreams and unexplained feelings. He listened to them all. One night, Elia stood again at the same place where it all began. The observation deck. Below her, the planet turned slowly, glowing in soft blue light. Mark stepped beside her, silent for a moment. "Do you ever miss the way things were before?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "No, because that world was smaller. This one is unknown. But it is really." Smiled softly. "What now?" "We keep walking," she said. "Wherever this path leads, we walk it together." He reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation, and in the quiet hum of the station above the turning world, two lives stood together. Not as alien and human, but as a bond that had waited through time, to be found again, and this time they would not let it be forgotten. The end.